Welcome to Running for Real, a global community with a shared love and curiosity for running. Together we reconnect with the reasons why we love to run and discover ways it helps us become better people. Whether it's the quiet moments of a morning run while the rest of the world still sleeps, or befriending the strangers next to you at the start line of a race, we are here to connect with others who see running as the common thread that weaves our lives together. Come join me, Tina Muir, as I talk with people from all walks of life, united by a love of running. Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 392 of the Running for Real podcast. Thank you for joining me. I'm excited that you are here and really excited for you to meet my guest today. Erin Bailey is someone that I have known for about a year now, maybe a little bit over, and just truly admired for the way she shows up in the space, shows up for others, is there for others, and just genuinely believes in us appreciating our value and doing the best that we can. Now, we talk and we have an interesting conversation about influencers, about creators, about doing things in a social media world and how to create boundaries when you are in that world. But we also go beyond that and talk about things like imposter syndrome, working through this hustle mindset that we are told that if you want to achieve something, if you want to get something in life, you have to grind yourself to the bone to be able to do it. We really have a deep conversation about that. We talk about the community side of running and how Erin entered the sport during the pandemic and how she has come here to stay and what she's learned about the running community. This was a really fun conversation in a different way. I adore Erin and the way she views the world, and I think you're going to really enjoy getting to know her too. So with just a quick word from one of our sponsors, we'll be right to this episode with Erin Bailey. Thank you to HydroPack for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast and for just being a partner of mine in 2024. I am so excited to be working alongside HydroPack. I have mentioned that I genuinely believe this is the future of sustainable racing, is us carrying our own fuel. It means we can have what we need when we need it. We don't have to rely on races. We don't have to rely on volunteers. We can carry our own stuff, do our part as runners, because most of us are not going for split second of where every second counts. And HydroPack has really developed these amazing innovations to make it as easy as possible for us. So today I want to talk about one of my favorite items, which is a Sky Flask Speed. Now, my favorite thing about this, when I think of a handheld, I think of this very boxy, awkward, have to scrunch and hold your fingers in place to keep the bottle in your hand. That is no longer the case. HydroPack has made this Sky Flask, which has a strap that fits beautifully on your hand. It's a soft flask, so your hand just kind of molds to it. It stays in place. It doesn't bounce. It doesn't chafe. It doesn't rub. And my favorite part is the flip top lid. One flick with your thumb and the whole lid opens to refill very easily and quickly, comes out easily. It breaks down or squashes down into such a tiny little space that fits anywhere. You could even stick it in your waistband. I really love this innovation, the Sky Flask Speed 500. If you are looking for a place to start with HydroPack, that is definitely where I would recommend you head. And if you go to hydropack.com/Tina, you can check out some of my favorites. You can go find out more about what HydroPack is up to. You also can go beyond running if you are someone who likes to go hiking or camping. There is also stuff on there for you. Go check out HydroPack. I'm excited for the work that they are doing, and I can't wait to hear what you think once you try it out. Erin, my friend, I am so excited to welcome you to the Running for Real podcast. Thank you for joining me today.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. I have absolutely loved getting to know you over the last year or so, just over a year, when we were randomly put in a I don't know, what would you call it? Like a working group
I know.
With AG1 and thanks to our dear friend, John Korn. And then I just fell in love with you in that moment. And I was like, we have to be friends. And since then we have been, and it's been amazing. We've had many special memories already. And I look forward to more and want to let everyone here get to know you. So, for you, I want to start with talking about something that you mentioned when we were talking before about how you came into the running space, officially I guess how you totally made the move to considering yourself a runner, which was during the pandemic. There was a huge amount of people who entered the space because you basically didn't have any other choice. And I love that so many of the people that have come in that way out of desperation have stayed and discovered a passion for it. And so let's talk about that piece of what were your thoughts during the early parts of the pandemic when you realized running was the only option? Did it start out as a I know you had run in the past a little bit, but did it feel like it was a brick wall that you had to overcome, or how did you embrace that?
Yeah, I came from the fitness professional background, so I had taught boutique fitness classes. And with that, I felt like I had a certain level of authority in that type of space, and I felt confident in that space. And so entering the running scene, I think I was holding myself to a standard that didn't make sense, and trying to translate a lot of that fitness into running, which it is a totally different ballgame. So for me, I think initially it was just incredibly humbling. And I think that was a really great lesson to learn of we all start from whatever our baseline is. But for me, I was really wanting that baseline to be higher than it was. And so it was really, one of those great lessons of with running, it's so much of just time. It's time and it's patience, and it will reward you if you show up for it, but you have to be consistent and you have to show up. And so early on, I hired a running coach. And that was largely because I had a corporate or a company stipend for fitness. And I was like, how can I use this? And so I hired a coach, which was Mary Johnson. I still work with her and she's amazing.
Love Mary.
But for me, it was so much to one, learn about running from this. I just having that, I think, fitness professional brain. I liked being able to learn about how your body really adapts. But I hired her to help me build consistency and build a base, not to race. I didn't race for the first couple of years. It wasn't about that for me. It was very much about just learning about how to get better at this thing that felt so challenging for me and so frustrating about how hard it was. So I think I had a real push-pull with running and a relationship with running for a long time, because I think running for me got much more fun once I started to get better at it. And you do see progress, but it just takes a really long time. So I was running a lot by myself because it was COVID and everyone was spending a lot of time by themselves. I was living alone in Boston, far from my family. So I started to find little bits of community, and I connected with my friend Cal, and him and I would do long runs together. And he's someone who was way faster than me, had far more experience than I did, but he met me where I was and would go at my paces, and we'd always end with a sweet treat, go to the bakery. And so we started to find these little rhythms and routines that I think helped me just embrace running and embrace it for me. And then I think I've just been able to build on that solid, I think, foundation kind of for the next, 4 years now. So
I know, it's crazy. So then it sounds like you were kind of almost immediately at a sponge state of okay, this is the situation I'm in. I want to soak up and absorb all the information that I can about this sport, rather than seeing it as I'll deal with this until things open up again, and then I'll go back to what I was doing before. Yeah.
And I think I naturally have as much as I like to think I don't, I'm naturally pretty competitive. So I think it became what's something I can kind of fall into a challenge of it for me. So consistency was a challenge. And I think to be honest, I probably mentally thought I was going to do it until gyms came back. Gyms took so long to come back. And then I also realized I also just had this built up, I think, just fear. I think COVID just kind of I was more nervous in spaces that I traditionally hadn't been nervous in. But then also I was living in Boston and been so city locked for such a long time. I think I really loved how much running got me outside and into bits of nature. And I think I really also latched on to some of those things that I hadn't really experienced, and you don't experience in gym settings.
And then I would imagine for you, having had parents who were runners themselves, you used to, run to spend time with them as a kid. once you started adding in group settings or adding in people to run with, it probably brought back some level of like familiarity that you'd forgotten kind of existed.
Totally. And honestly, I spent a lot of time back where I'm from in Asheville, North Carolina. So tons of trails, tons of outdoor space. And so I'd still go run with them. And at this point, like, our paces were all over the place. And so we'd all kind of drive to a trail together. And then we'd be like, let's meet back in 45 minutes or 60 minutes or whatever. And then all go on our individual runs and then come back and then like chat about it and just like, how did that go? What podcast were you listening to? And like still kind of have those elements of, community within our own kind of goals and ambition. So yeah, I think I still got to pull in pieces of that. And then I think that community aspect of running like exploded when I moved to New York, because it was a whole different ballgame in such a daunting way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it is interesting to me that a lot of the runners who came in as initially like pandemic was where they really shifted into, the running space as a full-time passion. For a lot of you, or maybe even most that I've spoken to, the community piece is at the heart. And I do wonder how much of the correlation of that was, yes, you were kind of, for many people, they were forced into it because of, like we said, the gym closures, but also we were so desperate for community, so desperate for human interaction that it built the foundation on that rather than, I'm very curious, had runners like you, like our mutual friend Matt Choi, come into this space when it wasn't the pandemic. Would you all have been much more focused on the results side of things because you wouldn't have had that like drive for community at the heart? Have you thought about that?
I haven't, and I think that's such a good point. And I'm curious too, because I do feel like, at least for me, I had a lot of community at the gym and at previous, in previous movement spaces. And that was a big factor because you wanted to see your friends in class, or you were teaching a class and you had your regulars and you were so invested in their progress. And that I feel like sometimes in movement spaces, like I'm now saying this for the first time, so we'll see how much this sticks. But I was like, I think some people are just drawn to building community anyways. And, you mentioned Matt Choi, and I think I didn't know him before the running community, but I get a sense like he's just that type of person. Like, I think he has an energy that when you are in his presence, you are literally drawn to it, right?
Or even like 50 meters away.
Exactly. Like he just has that like energetic pull. And so I wonder if, Thank you. I think there's some people that I think we just love community, and we love people, and we love connecting with people. And I think it almost wouldn't matter what we were doing. We would probably find elements of that in anything. So I'm sure there's both sides of it. There's so much explosion for community, but I imagine, I don't know, maybe that would happen regardless.
And I think that's so needed. I mean, I've had many conversations on this podcast about like with the crew leaders and people who are building spaces for those who didn't feel like they were welcomed before, feel like they can, I just love hearing where people typically often now use the, whether you're a 10-minute per mile runner or an 18-minute per mile runner, rather than in the past, it was whether you're a 6-minute per mile or a 9-minute. Like 9-minute was the slow end. And so I love that there's so much work that's been done to bring people in of all, of every experience level.
Agreed.
But we haven't really talked about like you bringing in the community side that you are bringing in is very much, how do we make this accessible in terms of like, how do I teach you or show you a way or let you go along with my journey so you can learn about running in little snippets? And we mentioned before we started recording that Amanda Brooks, a mutual friend of ours, was kind of the original person to start doing this with her Run to the Finish. That was it. Yeah. Run to the Finish. But there's been a whole wave of you that have come in that have made it very accessible and easy to learn for the average runner. So I'd love to hear you talk about why that piece is so important to you of, Just being someone who breaks running down, so it's not like you feel like you're the odd one out because you don't know what a tempo is, or you don't know what you should be wearing at a certain temperature.
I think there's so many of us that do that now because so many of us didn't have that when we started running 3 and 4 years ago, right? Like, and I think that's so important because there's so much space for lots of different types of people and goals and activities in running. And so regardless if people are coming in and wanting to be a part of the running community because they want to walk run and that's all they ever want to do, like, I think there needs to be space for that person to see someone that also looks like them. There also needs to be space for someone to see someone like one of the talent we work with, Caitlin Keene. Caitlin Keene is a sub-elite runner, right? She's qualified for the Olympic trials. She runs a 2:45 marathon. So like when she's talking about hard workouts and paces and her having an easy run, and her easy run's an 8-minute mile, for people to also see like, oh, there's room for a competitive edge like that isn't the pro, right? Like, I think there's just so much room for what running can look like. And I think it's important for people to identify like with people that are like them, people they can learn from, people they can aspire to. Like that's why there's so many, I feel like, creators in this space now. And there's room, honestly, for, I think, also a lot of the creators, right? Because we all are kind of sharing different stories and different missions. And, some people I think are better at sharing some of the technical things, like Amanda, like she's so good about these shoe reviews. And also is really funny these days. She has so many of these like memes that come out and I'm like, these are such like great runner memes, So I just think people are also just putting out so many different types of content that makes running feel more accessible, because at the heart of it, it should be a sport we all have access to. And I think there's a lot of important people that are doing that work to showcase that. And I think the more people that are showing their journeys, then the more people that want to get involved because they see a journey that they either are also on or hope to be on.
Taking care of your health isn't always easy, but it should at least be simple. That's why for the last 5 years, I've been drinking AG1 every day. No exceptions, 1 scoop mixed in water once a day, every day, and it makes me feel good. I feel energized. I can take on the day knowing no matter what happens, no matter what my food intake looks like, I have taken care of myself. That's because each serving of AG1 delivers my daily dose of vitamins, minerals, pre- and probiotics, and more. It's a powerfully healthy habit that's also powerfully simple. I know with AG1, I'm getting this high quality nutrition. Every batch goes through this rigorous testing process so you know it's safe. Their ingredients are sourced for absorption, potency, and nutrient density. If there's one product I had to recommend to elevate your health, it's AG1. And that's why I've partnered with them for so long. So if you want to take ownership of your health, start with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3 and K2 and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase exclusively at drinkag1.com/Tina. That's drinkag1.com/Tina. Check it out. Yeah, no, absolutely. So then from there, with the content creation side of things, with putting this stuff out there, how do you keep your boundaries, your sanity, your, with being a content creator, with spending a lot of energy thinking about social media and how you can support other runners, but also, grow yourself? How do you set those boundaries for your own mental health with that? Because it can be really challenging. And for someone who, puts a lot of what you do as a creator on that social media side of things, how do you keep that healthy?
Oh my gosh. I think it's a constant gut check. And I'd say like, I don't know how good or not great I am at it. I think it ebbs and flows, honestly. And I think sometimes that ebbs and flows based on how excited I am to show up on the platform. So sometimes natural boundaries just kind of come up because I'm feeling a need to be a little more withdrawn and hold things a little closer to the chest. And other moments I'm feeling much more excited and more excited to share. But I think I've just been in this space now for such a long time. I've had an account, a public account, for almost 10 years now. And I've been on this side of it, both as an individual creator and working for brands and tons of creators, and now having an agency where we support creators. Like, I've just seen so many sides of it. And I've seen so many people share too much and maybe share things before they were ready, and share because they felt like they owed the information about their very personal lives and very personal stories to a community that had been with them for so long. And that's just not true. Like, it is your platform. It is your rules. You get to decide what people need to know and when they need to know it. And I think we often, and I've had bouts of this, especially, younger in the platform, like, I would almost process things in public with the community. And as things were happening,
I'm so guilty of that. I do that. I'm probably doing
We
that
all do it. Yes. And sometimes it's okay, right? Like, I think sometimes, like, there's a piece of that that's helpful. And sometimes, for me, I've realized, like, almost pulling people in too soon is really detrimental for me, right? And even thinking about it, like, this is somewhat of a silly example, but like, I put a lot of pressure on myself around racing. Like, as much as I love running and I put a lot of time and energy into running, I traditionally have not performed in races in the way that I know I can. And a lot of that is because I am putting self-inflicted pressure because I have this audience that I've brought them on this journey with me to get to this race. I've brought them on the race. They know my goals. They know my expectations. And I'm literally running this race, and I'm thinking about how I'm going to share the performance rather than being in the race, which is, I know, so common, right? And I think some people thrive on that and like rise to the occasion. And for me, it chews me up and spits me out whole. So I just think I've done that in so many ways, right? I've shared too early in breakups. I've shared too early in moves. Like, I've shared too early in business decisions. And I think I'm now probably more cautious than ever because I've made a lot of mistakes in that regards. And also realized how much of it it's not for other people, how much of it's for me, and how much of it am I sharing because I'm looking for attention or looking for validation or needing something, and how much of it am I sharing because I think it could help somebody else. And I think I'm now at a place where that's kind of the filter I put on everything of like, what value am I adding by sharing this? And if the value is purely entertainment, or the value is purely informational, or whatever, like, that's okay. But like, that I think is what's most important, and not, I'm sharing this because I'm looking for this amount of validation or this amount of feedback on this post. And I think that's what I think more, again, I'm a forever work in progress. I'm not saying I'm there, but I think more, just influencers, creators, athletes, people with public personas, like, knowing that social media is at its core a feedback loop. You are putting something out there for people to give you feedback on. You have to be ready to hear feedback, no matter what the feedback is on any of those things. And if you aren't ready for external feedback, you aren't ready to put that thing out yet. And so that's at its core, I think, what I coach a lot of our talent on. And I think what more people with public profiles need to consider.
I feel like I definitely need some lessons. Yeah, no, that's something that I've thought about a lot. As you said, especially the processing end of it. I definitely do that a lot. As you know, as the time we're recording this, I just did that a few hours ago. And I did keep some, I told you some of the details that I'm not going to share online, but yeah, it's a challenging one, and it can be so addicting. Like, one thing I am proud of myself for is not, like, I mean, you've seen this, I've seen this from you when we've spent time together in person, is not sitting there with our phones on the desk, not having our phones in our hand, like you being present. And that, to me, is the most critical thing of all, like, to be present with people when I'm with them. And so I think one of the things I'm proud of myself for is not doing it in the moment. Like, I might hold my phone up, snap, put it down for something, but I'm not going to like sit there and do it in real time, because that, as you said, with the same thing with the race, if you're just constantly living of like, oh, what can I take a picture of that? Or I better put that up. Like, then you're living a life through a lens. And I'm really starting to see it with my kids as well. Like my 6-year-old particularly, she's noticing everyone has phones. She knows 10, 11-year-olds who have their own phones. They're talking about their phones. And she is like, let's look it up on the phone, or like, let's take a picture of this. And I'm like, how am I here at age 6? And so I'm very aware right now, but it is really challenging. And also, especially for people like you and I, who this is part of what you do. There is no like, I mean, I often say that if I could delete my social media, I would. And I genuinely believe I would. But I like you, a work in progress of trying to figure out what the best way about keeping my mental health with that being a part of what I do.
There's a ton of pros and cons, right? I think about this a lot. Like there's, the amount that social has given me to date has outweighed the cons of what it's taken from me. I think it's given me an incredible amount of, just literal opportunities of events or trips or partners or whatever, right? It's connected me to incredible people. It's given me, an opportunity for business. My business wouldn't have existed 10 years ago, right? Like, it's opened an incredible amount of doors. But I do think you're right in that, I think it's interesting that I started to think about like, how do I live my life differently because I have a public presence, and do I? And several years ago, I think I made more decisions based on things I would post rather than now. And now I feel like I very much live authentically, and I show things that are part of my life. 5 years ago, I think I would do things that I also wanted to take photos of and share. And that's a really tough position to be in. And I think that's a position a lot of people can be in sometimes. And I think that's something that feels really hard. And when you're thinking about boundaries, it's like, what do you want social to serve in your life? And not how is your life serving social? And that's just that's a constant daily gut check, right? Like, are you getting the coffee because you want to go take a photo of your post-run coffee? Or are you getting a coffee because you're going to enjoy the taste of that coffee? Like, it's that simple, Are you buying the outfit because you really like that outfit and it makes you feel really strong in that run and you're excited about it? Or are you buying the outfit because you feel like you need a new outfit to post on social because you've posted too many of your other outfits, right? Like, it's that conversation constantly. And I find myself, I get sucked into it all the time. And last summer, I found myself in that literal loop, and I immediately turned on TikTok and was just like, we're doing all of these fit checks. Like, this is this from this and this and this. And I found myself being like, oh, I need a different outfit because I've already shown this outfit. And I was like, no. And so I started this thing called Same Fit Check. And I would be like, this is the Nike Pro Sports Bra I've had for 5 years. And these are the shocks I was gifted 3 years ago. And these are like, how are we also just like normalizing normal life in this world where so much isn't normal?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that speaks to my environmental heart of you using things and, having them for many years in a row, and that being, okay. Also, for me, the normalizing piece is that we runners sometimes wear the same item 2 days. Like, that's okay too. Yeah. Like, you don't have to, if it's 50 degrees and you have a t-shirt and you run in it and you barely sweat, like, you can wear that again the next day. So yeah, I appreciate that. Totally. And one other example of that. So one good example you're saying about the good it brought to you. I was speaking to someone recently who deleted their social media, and they were saying, one thing I really miss is finding out about like new coffee shops that are opening. And I thought that was so funny because you had just sent me, Black Lab, I think that's the name of his coffee place here in St. Louis, a friend of yours. You had sent me, and then I went to it the next day, met Tommy. Yep. And I just thought it was very interesting that was one of the takeaways someone who had deleted their social media had, was like missing moments like that where someone sends an opening to something that they would never know about otherwise. So, yeah, it was very interesting. Okay. I want to shift to, you've mentioned about your agency, what you do with momentum management. I would love for you to share, starting off, what that is for someone who has not heard of it.
Totally. Yeah. So momentum management is I say we're half talent management, half brand consulting, and we really work in this intersection of like influence and impact. So for me, the genesis was, again, living through this pandemic and through that kind of social justice movement we lived through, and I think now we're continuing to live through and reckon with. Like, I felt like there were all of these people with public profiles that just weren't utilizing them to talk about things that they really cared about. And when I took that veil of judgment off, and I was like, they are one-man shows, right? And you know this, like, you are doing everything. You are creating the content, you're creating the strategy, you're doing the finances. Like, it's quite literally everything. I was like, sometimes, coming back to the idea of, again, it's a feedback loop. Like, you don't feel like you can put something out there, and it could be something you really care about, but what if you get backlash, and how do you handle that? And does it make sense for you to talk about it, or how will your community engage? Like, there were just all of these other factors that I realized, people could be reckoning with. So if we came in and we became a talent agency, that's what we are, our core. But we were somebody that, one, could just be more integrated with our talent partners. So we're not a traditional talent agency where we just kind of one and done brand deals and we move on. We really support voices that we think need elevation. We think they need to take up more space. So for us, that ends up being a lot of women, non-binary athletes, and then people with social impact missions. Like, that's kind of the core of who we are. It's like, how can we support people, and also help them monetize their brands, help them, show up in ways they feel really excited about, and be just like a true partner for who they are and how they want to show up. And that's kind of the genesis of how we started. And so it's now been a year and a half. We work with about 20 talent and athletes. We just announced our first pro athlete a few weeks ago, which is super exciting. We just done brand.
Who is?
Nikki Hiltz. Nikki Hiltz, incredible track athlete, trans non-binary track athlete, crushing the 1500. And I mean, it's a perfect example, right? Like, Nikki has an incredible social community. I mean, just a community that really, really is supportive of them. And they do incredible work, not only as an athlete, being an insane athlete, but also just like being an advocate for the LGBTQ community. So for us, they work with Lululemon. They're sponsored by Article 1. Like, how can we also continue to help create brand opportunity and partnership opportunities for them with brands that want to support an athlete like Nikki, who we think very much deserves to take up, more space and more sponsorship dollars, right? Why not? Sure. So Nikki's a perfect example. And then we also do some brand consulting work. So for the other side of it, we work with like Planned Parenthood of New York, and we manage their charity marathon team. So it's everything in that world of movement, influence, and social impact is really the bridge that we want to be touching.
And you brought up, two, I think, of the key points that I'd like to bring up with what you're doing here. The first, you just mentioned it in terms of social impact, and using your voice to speak out. Now, it is scary enough to launch something of your own, to become an entrepreneur, to push the boundaries in terms of what fear tells you is something too big, too scary. We very much come from I don't know, maybe because I'm, a good bit older than you, I don't know, maybe you don't have the same messaging, but you should go get a 9 to 5. This is how life is meant to be. So you're pushing against that, but doing it with kind of being very vocal. You have spoken up about many of the topics that are considered polarizing, that are considered hot button, using your voice to stand up what matters to you. That seems like another layer of taking that leap. So let's talk through that piece of it, of not only choosing to go out on your own as an entrepreneur, but choosing to do it in a very thoughtful and intentional way, knowing that was going to probably lose you some potential people, but what you gain in the process.
I think for me, that just wasn't ever a question. Like, I was often the person sitting in previous companies and previous roles where in those companies, they had certain social impact initiatives and certain partners. And when push came to shove, it never felt like they were doing enough, or never felt like they were really doing what they were marketing that they were doing, and I truly believe that a lot of these brands did have the best intentions, right? I think a lot of people genuinely have good intentions, but most of these businesses were built to profit in one way. And the social impact piece was just like an aside and something they felt like they should do, could do, and also could market. Right. And that was really popular. And so I was often the person in the room that was like, why aren't we doing more? Why is this it? Right. How else can we show up? And often, because, they were building a business, and also lots of startups. So I now being on this side of things, I fully get it. But it just didn't feel good enough for me. And so when I started Momentum, like that was, for probably the year and a half before, I had been looking at lots of different opportunities. I mean, in quite literally anything, like nonprofit things, political things, advocacy things, like really just like exploring, like, what is this pull in me? And realizing like, maybe there's a way I can do it in the world that I already know. Like, how can I impact the world that I'm in, of this influencer, social marketing world? How can we maybe make it a little bit better? So starting Momentum, like, and again, like, we're not perfect. There's far more that we could do, right? There's plenty of learnings there. And at the end of the day, like, we also are a business, and, we have goals that we're trying to hit as well. But I do believe that there's a world where, with good intention, and knowing that, like, that's a part of our mission statement and a part of our ethos is to care about these communities and care about these causes, that I think we can make it better. And I'd say, the interesting part with that too is, like, with a lot of our talent, some are more comfortable talking about controversial issues than others. For us, it's never about us pushing our agenda. It's how can we support whatever you care about? Like, there's a lot of really complicated issues in the world, and I don't think we should expect all influencers to talk about all of them, because they are not experts, right? That's not who we should be going to for that content. But, like, knowing that there's still an impact you have with things that you care about, I think there's still more influencers could do, right? So what we want to be is that safe place and that safe resource, that we're not going to come here and judge you because you're not talking about these things, but how can we help you think about ways that you can integrate things that do feel good on your platform, right? So we are often the first call all of our talent will make if something big in the world is going on. We're sending out an email to everyone saying, hey, this is what, this is what we're seeing. Open door. If there's anything we can help with, if you want to put out a statement, if you want to talk about what that means to say something, like, we're here for you. So a little bit of that almost like crisis calm side of things. And often talent will call us and just be like, I don't know what to say, but my heart hurts for the situation and I want to understand it better. And do you have resources I can, like, look at or point to or whatever? And even if they don't decide to say something, we've often gone through, iterations of creating the public statement. And then at the end of the day, they're like, this just doesn't feel right to me. And then that's fine. Right. But, like, they're at least thinking about it, right? They're at least intentional about, one, what's happening in the world, two, how it affects their community, and three, like, what they think their purpose could be. And sometimes often lots of influencers are doing far more behind the scenes than we even realize. And that's important too. But the idea is, like, I think that's a part of the change. So even if they're not saying something day 1 or day 10 or day 20, like, they're thinking about it and they're being intentional about it. And I think once they come up with, once they're there and they're, again, ready for that feedback, like, we're also the people to be there to support them.
What would you remind someone, like a listener who maybe is going to has already come across, but is going to come across their favorite person, creator, athlete, influencer they follow online, who is maybe silent or quiet on something that they feel they should be speaking out about right away or within a few days? Because, I've had situations where I've been involved, not maybe involved, but people have been tagging me in something. What do you think about this? What do you think about this? And I just didn't feel ready to say something. As you said, I wanted to collect all the information. I wanted to think through it. I wanted to see what my heart said. But what would you like to remind someone who is looking at it from the kind of absorption side? They are the follower. They are the one interested, and they feel like someone should be speaking up about something, but they don't see anything.
I think I mean, I think the interesting part is like one of the first things that came to mind too is like, one, yourself or the talent or the creator or whatever, like what an incredible community and authority you've built in order for people to like want your opinion on something. Like, I think that's really impressive, right? So whether you're willing to give it or not, like I think anyone kind of challenging anyone who's from the influencer talent standpoint that has people challenge them to speak up or wanting their opinions on things, like that's a huge, I think sometimes that feels really scary too, because you're like, oh, I'm letting these people down. Like they trust you, they respect you. And so they want your opinion and they want your voice. And that's a huge honor. So like, that's something you've built and that's like incredible in itself. I think people that want certain, I think as consumers, people that want certain, I mean, brands, influencers to speak out, I'd say one, like always approach things from a level of grace. You have no idea how this situation, as much as we think we know influencers and talent, you have no idea how the situation's actually affecting people. Like it could be affecting them because you see it connecting to them in an incredibly personal way. And so therefore they haven't been able to process it and come out in an authoritative position around it. So I think in general, we need to give influencers more grace about quite literally everything. I think it's incredibly hard to have a public profile, no matter how big or small you are. Like choosing to live in public is really, really difficult. So I'd say one, just give them a level of grace. I think two, if it feels like something you would want them to speak out about or are curious to hear their opinion, I'd always encourage a DM, like just always in private first. Like don't call people out on their posts or on, like, I think any of that call out culture just ends up putting, I think, people in a defensive nature, which isn't typically what people want, right? Like no one wants to feel attacked. No one wants to be attacked. So I'd say if you want to shoot them a DM, respectfully say like, hey, this is going on. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this. If you feel comfortable sharing publicly, I think the community would really, there'd be a lot of value from that. Like sharing it from this place of grace, I think is always just helpful. And sometimes like, I've often had conversations in my DMs that in a way that I wasn't ready to have publicly yet, but it helped me realize what I should be saying publicly. So sometimes those things are really helpful, but I think always with a level of like empathy for, the person in the public eye.
Thank you to Precision for your support of me and the Running for Real podcast. I hoped I would be running lots of ultras this year. That is not my reality. I am having surgery, and that's going to mean ultras are definitely not something I'm going to be doing, at least in the first half of the year. But one of the beautiful things about this is that it does give me the opportunity to really train and practice my stomach, because one of the biggest things for us as runners is getting our fueling correctly. And if, by the way, you don't know how much fuel you should be taking, how much hydration, electrolytes you should be taking, Precision has a free fuel and electrolyte or fuel and hydration planner. It's free. You don't have to use Precision stuff, but you should definitely go check out the links in the show notes to go get yourself that planner, use it, make the most of it. You can also get a free consultation with the Precision team. No strings attached. Just go take opportunity of that. That is in the show notes. But today I want to talk about practicing. So one of the biggest things is practicing your gel and nutrition. And for me, that's something I was never particularly good at when I was running at my best. And I know I left a lot of time on the table by not doing that. So that's where while I have been biking, I'm up to 34 miles, hoping to get to 50 before I go in for my surgery. With that, I've been able to test out the gels. The PF30 gels has 30 grams of carb. They go down easily. You don't get flavor fatigue. They are just enjoyable to take down, even not just for a gel, just in general. And I definitely encourage you to go check them out. If you use code Tina Sent Me at precisionhydration.com, you can get yourself 15% off. That is code Tina Sent Me. Go check out their gels. Go check out their chews, their electrolytes. They will take care of you. And I'm excited to hear what you think. Go check it out. Yeah, absolutely. And I have had quite a few of those DMs, and I've really appreciated when someone has drawn my attention to something or is saying like, I'm just curious what you're thinking about this. And it gives me the opportunity to think it through with their perspective without it being, as you said, an attacking way of like through a comment.
Totally.
Okay. So then I want to talk through starting your own business. You said it's been a year and a half. You've done very well, got some amazing talent that you are really, it's really, cool to see what you're building here. But you have been from the outset, and especially now, have been very vocal about not taking on the typical entrepreneur lifestyle that has been shoved down our throats for the last, as long as I've had my business, since 2017, of hustle, gotta work harder. If you're not prepared, the Gary, I don't even know if I'd say Gary V, but the method of if you want this, you gotta work for it, and you gotta work, be prepared to do 50, 100-hour weeks to do this. But you have revolted against that and still been successful. So let's talk to that piece.
When I first started this, I had this day where this might have been I don't even know, maybe 2 months in. And I realized and this sounds so silly now, but going from working for someone else for my entire career, and often lots of startups, I was just still waiting for someone to tell me what to do, or someone to tell me when I was doing well or when I wasn't doing well. You're just so conditioned that way. It's a really weird thing to be oh no, I'm now responsible for whatever that threshold was. And all of that opened up this idea of oh, I'm actually responsible for what this entire thing looks like what momentum is, what kind of culture momentum has, what type of hours we want to have, what type of hours I want to have. And I realized it was so much more beyond just me, but also realizing my goal was to build a business that was outside of me. It's not eBay Consulting, right? It's a larger entity. So while I was the only employee, there was always going to be others. So I was what do I want to be building here? And what does that mean? And I literally took myself down to the beach and I just journaled about it. And I was just what's fun for me? I'm doing this because I want to have impact. I want to be able to support myself. And I want to enjoy it. I want to enjoy the work. And what can I create that's going to be able to check all those boxes? And I realized for me, as much as I love my job, and there are weeks that it really, really takes far more hours than I wish it did. But I love that I get to work with people who are incredible and doing incredible things, and brands that are super innovative. And I get to be at all these really fun events with, friends in the community. And I can also shut my computer at 5:00 and go to happy hour and have drinks. And the world isn't going to get set on fire because we're not saving lives here, right? It's still just influencer marketing. So I think I just had this balance of I can check these boxes and that's what success looks like for me, rather than I need to be the biggest and I need to be the best and there needs to be more money. And I think getting really clear on what success not only looks like from the business Excel side, but also felt like from the entrepreneur side was really important early on. And I think that's a constant, gut check with myself. But I didn't feel happier when I was working 12-hour days or 14-hour days than not. And so I felt really empowered, and I feel really content in this level of autonomy and freedom I've built with this work. And then that we still get to do good work and we're still successful and we still support a lot of people. And all of those things can be true. And I'll also say I'm, I live in New York, but I don't by myself, I don't have a family. I don't have children. I don't have the other demands. So I have a lot more autonomy over, my own time. And I think that was an important consideration for me to start to realize of that also could change. And how do I want that to change as my family grows and future grows and how those things kind of develop. But ultimately, so much of that hustler culture and things I was shown just didn't work for me. It wasn't fun. And so cheesy, but I was you get one life, right? You no one tells you how to do it. So you get to change and iterate. And this is a new way I'm choosing to show up and work. And so far it is both enjoyable and it's working for me. So we'll ride that as long as we can.
Yeah, no, I think that's so important to mention. And where my brain goes from there is that must mean that you feel confident enough in your own value to be able to make up the difference, not to dilute yourself so that you can justify the amount that you're asking for, but your value enough to, do well, to survive, yes, but go beyond that and do well as a business. So speak to that piece, especially for women who may struggle with what that means for them in terms of like, okay, but if I don't do that, I'm not going to make enough to survive?
I think that's a great talking point. I think it's a really hard thing to learn. I'll say, to be honest, I've had a lot of incredible mentors, and I think they've really helped gut check that value in particular for me. One of them is, I've got some great female mentors and they're incredible, but I was like, one of my, closest mentors, and I've talked about him in other situations, is this man, Tony Wiseman, and him and I got connected super early in my career. And what I appreciate about him so much is he just advocates so fiercely for women. I mean, so fiercely. And he's often a white man at the top of the totem pole, and he does everything he can to open doors for young women, women of all ages. But, he specifically has a few younger women mentors who he's also connected me to. And he opens so many doors for me. He is so supportive of the work we do. And he's the first person to say, you're not charging enough. You're not charging enough. You can do more. This is what that value is. And I think often, like, I'm a pretty fierce advocate for women. And I think as women, we don't often talk about money. I didn't talk about money with a lot of my friends growing up. It wasn't something that we talked about a ton with my family. And so I needed support. I needed to learn from people who did feel really comfortable in those conversations. And so now we're in a position where my job is almost talking about money all day long, right? Like, we're literally negotiating deals. And it's so, I feel so much more confident now also advocating for other people, and have also had to really, that's helped me realize, like, I value them so significantly. Why don't I value myself the same way, right? Or do I value myself the same way? So a piece of that's also really helped strengthen that bond. But truly having mentors to be like, gut check you and just be like, this isn't enough. Like, I just think is invaluable. And we need more people, like, women are amazing, but I was like, we also need more men. We need more men that are opening doors for women and really supporting them and helping them kind of bridge the gap, because that's, I think, as the feminist movement continues, like, that's how it goes that much further.
For sure. Yeah, no, same as you. I've had female mentors who have said to me exactly the same thing, like, not even, hey, you're not charging enough, but like, I am not going to let you accept this anymore. And I've needed that kick of not just like, hey, maybe you should ask a little more, but like, no, enough is enough. And then also, same as you, had some male mentors who were very, very, very good at saying, hey, Tina, come over here for a minute. I want to introduce you to, hey, Tina, come over here for a minute. I want to, I want to happen to bring you into this conversation. Well, like, he knows full well that will lead to something. And I think you're right. Like, having that combination, especially when someone is very established in the space of, you and I have had a lot of conversations about this, about, loving to surround ourselves with women, but also men, but primarily women who want to look back, open, and hold the door open. Yeah. Like Mary Kane once said to me that she wants to stand forever at the door, holding it open. And I just, that really stuck with me. And I think you and I are both those people too. But viewing it, we talked about, in that International Women's Day podcast a few weeks ago, it was a similar thing of like, those women were all very, very, very intentional, you included, about advocating for other people to come through and recognizing that one person's success is not taking away from you. So we need more of that approach in general, but particularly when it comes to women with other women.
Absolutely. Often I feel like those are the harshest critics, is not other men in the space, but it's other women feeling like you're taking their spot or feeling like you have something they have. And I think that's a piece of that, I think, is just like human nature. But I think that's a piece that we have to just even if those feelings come up, is something we have to like recognize and face head on and say, like, I was actually just talking to another woman about this, where she referenced the like Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote of, at what point does it become equal at the Supreme Court? She's like, is it 50-50? And she's like, 50-50? She's like, no, why can't we have 9 women on the bench? Like, that's when it's equal. Men have taken over the bench for so many years. Like, why can't it be our turn? And I think that's what, it's not about creating one more seat for a woman. It's like, we're allowed to take up all of that space. And like, that has to be like the goal and the opportunity. Not that we're here to like diminish men in any regards, but like, we just have so much to offer and there's so much value that we bring. And we should be supporting each other in order to continue to elevate that value and elevate those offerings.
So true. Actually, my daughter, she's brought this up 3 or 4 times now. She's got obsessed and stuck on the fact that dollar bills only have men on them. And she keeps saying to me, like, but mummy, why is there only boys on there? And I'm like, well, I mean, like, what level of answer do I give you here?
Yeah.
But then, I've kind of explained it as, that's the way it's been. These were men who were kind of making decisions and sometimes people thought that girls weren't as important as men. But in her logical brain, she's like, but why not now? Why isn't there women now? And like, it's so hard. Amen. Because in her head, she's saying something to me and I'm like, I get it. Like in your brain, you're like, but this is not fair. So why don't we change it? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, girl, I'm with you, but I don't have an answer here.
Words.
But you're right. Like, and that money thing is a good example of like, do I see that changing? No, but we've got in opportunities that there are doors to open, that there are ways to bring women in. We've got to keep pushing beyond just like balancing it back out.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, just so interesting. She's brought it up like 3 or 4 times to me. She even said to me yesterday, but paper money isn't real money because it's only got boys on it and that's not right.
I love that. That's the new face of our feminist movement. Yeah. Paper money isn't real money. Only boys are there.
Maybe we should have women on the credit cards to balance, to take it beyond balancing it back out.
All right, Visa, MasterCard, Amex, who's listening to this? I was like, let's counterbalance it out.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Erin, is there anything else you'd like to share with the listeners today? Anything else that you think is very important based on the topics that we've brought up, or just something you'd like to remind people as an overarching message?
We talked about so many great moments. I'd say like, I think for anyone that wants to have a social presence, anyone that wants to be in the public light, I really want to double down on like, it's a feedback loop. I think that's so important. Process your own stuff. Be ready to share publicly when you're ready to share publicly. I just think that's a message we can constantly like continue to hear and iterate on. And I think that one's so important. And also just hold grace for people in general. I think we're all out here doing the best we can with what we have. And so the more we can just kind of show up with empathy and curiosity, I think the better this all gets.
So true. So true. So if someone is a creator listening to this and they are interested in, or they have been thinking about management, having someone, take over part of what they're doing, help them grow, where would you send them?
Shoot me an email, just straight to me, Erin@momentummanagement.co. We'll take it. You can also reach out on Instagram and things like that too, but the easiest way is just shoot me an email. Let's chat.
Yep. And I will put links in the show notes.
Amazing.
Erin, I appreciate you so much for what you bring into this world.
Likewise,
just
Tina,
can't
likewise.
wait to see where the next chapter goes. So appreciate you. And let's see what we can do in the next 10 years.
Love it. Thanks, Tina.
Before we go any further, I just want to give a quick shout out to the Running for Real team. Without them, I would not be able to do barely anything compared to what I'm able to do today. They are behind the scenes. They are there for me. I am just so appreciative of them. To Jeremy Nessel, our podcast editor, audio consultant, and someone who's been with me since the start. to Sally Pontarelli, our content and operations manager, who is there day to day doing all the things to help me be successful, to Kelsey Wang, our head of design, and Louise Murphy, our associate designer, and finally to Sandy Gutierrez, our photographer and content strategist. I am appreciative of all of you and wouldn't be able to do what I do without you. Oh, I really enjoyed that conversation with Erin. I always enjoy my conversations with Erin. I hoped you liked that one too. You can go find links to Momentum, to Erin, and everything else we talked about today in the show notes by going to runningforreal.com/episode 392. You can also find links to our sponsors in there, to HydroPack, to AG1. A special thank you to AG1 for connecting Erin and I in the first place, and to Precision Fuel and Hydration. I encourage you to go check that out at runningforreal.com/episode 392. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week.